Bloomburrow is one of those sets that you almost have to think of fondly. It's a departure from the grim and grotesque of the early days of Magic. Duskmourn more than makes up for that. But like Lorwyn and Ixalan had their own charms as individual planes, so does Bloomburrow. People were understandably excited for the set. It reportedly sold extremely well, and we got a new cool plane to come back to. Today I want to talk about Helga Skittish Seer. In the lore, she's a shy little frog druid with no small amount of undiagnosed ADHD like the rest of us. In the card game, Helga is a bant commander that can hang with the best of them. She provides ramp and card draw in the command zone, an incredibly potent combination when you take a look in the deck archetypes she works best in. The most frequently built version of Helga is a +1/+1 counter deck. I think if you dig a little deeper, there's an archetype that is great for beginners, just as obvious and stompy. Hydras. The reason Hydras make such a natural pairing with Helga is their X costs. There isn't another creature archetype with more X's in their mana costs, which is often a setback for the deck. You can only spend so much mana before your lands and mana rocks are all tapped out. However, with Helga's ability to stack +1/+1 counters on herself, it's fairly easy to see a world in which you're casting Hydras where X equals 10 very early in a game. Helga's color identity is perfect for Hydras. Let's take a look at 11 Hydra staples you'll want to have from green, white, and blue. Gargos Vicious Watcher is an absolute beast. 6 mana, 8/7 with Vigilance, Forced Combat, and most importantly, it's got a Hydra cost reducer. Gargos is the most common Hydra commander for a reason, and it does not take a professional to see why. Whoever thought, let's mix a Hydra with a jellyfish, I want what you're smoking. Hydroid Crassus offers you something only 3 other Hydras do. Card draw, with life gain added on top. Hungering Hydra is the type of beater we all know and love from mono green and is incredibly thematic for Hydras. Every time it fights and one head is cut off, it just grows stronger. Just give it trample and watch it go to work. Any creature that can draw you cards, ramp you, or remove a threat is worth considering just a little more than others that don't. Voracious Hydra does the latter with Forced Combat, perfect for sniping your opponent's commanders, or some other value engine like Esper Sentinel. This is the same reason Steelbane Hydra is good, although Steelbane is a more consistent removal option, so it's a little bit better. Mistcutter Hydra hates blue players. You're the exception. A new Hydra from Thunder Junction, Goldbane Hydra gives you ramp with a treasure trove of keywords added on top. It's hilarious how pushed this card is. Primordial Hydra asks the question, why do we even need Doubling Season if I can do it myself every turn? If left unchecked, this card will roll over games, which is honestly true for many Hydras. With Helga as your commander, you want to get +1/+1 counters on her as well. Fastwood Hydra is an excellent facilitator for pumping up your key creatures. Up there for one of the best Hydra card arts out there, Genesis Hydra cheats out another non-land permanent when it hits the board. Pretty good when you're playing with big creatures, huh? Wilds of Eldraine is an awesome set where we got to see things like a giant goose with 7 heads. The Goose Mother is another Simic Hydra with card draw in the package. Honestly, there's a bit of a theme here with weird Simic Hydra creature combos being value engines. There are plenty of other good Hydras I didn't even get to, like Colonian Hydra and Benevolent Hydra. There are 51 Hydras within our commander's colors, so I don't want to go through each and every one of them. However, you're hopefully seeing the theme now. Hydras want you to cast them for huge amounts of mana, thematically giving them a new head to bite with. But in order to cast big creatures, you've got to have big mana. Let's talk through how we're getting there. Obviously, we've got our commander to help cast those Hydras for higher X values. Helga is a pretty big part of what makes this deck work simply because of how much utility she provides. Hell, you can even toss Trample on her if she gets enough +1/+1 counters on her to make it worth it. We're playing commander, so Soul Ring and Arcane Signet are obviously slotting in to bolster our ramp options. Hard not to include them, really. And we're playing green, so all those common green ramp spells you know and love fit in perfectly to get our lands out faster. If you haven't noticed, green makes up a huge portion of Hydra cards. Emerald Medallion just makes too much sense here. The talismans within your color identity are a decent addition if you like playing with them. They aren't quite as strong in this deck where we can get big mana easier, but nothing wrong with them. Same goes for the signets. There's also a Hydra that helps us ramp with Rampant Rejuvenator. It's even got ramp in the name. My personal favorite for big creature decks like this is Entish Restoration. Sacrificing a land isn't as bad as it sounds when you can just sack a land you've tapped this turn to net yourself 2 more lands. Ramp is great, but we've got to make sure we're hitting all of these cards. There's nothing worse than missing a land drop after your starting hand or not having the necessary mana sources to cast Helga early like we want to. This is where card draw comes in. Card draw in the command zone can be dominant, but we can't depend entirely on Helga. Let's look at good options for a big Hydra deck in Bant. Are you starting to see how good this little frog is? If you're looking for a secondary commander, Chulane Teller of Tales is an excellent choice. Chulane and Helga do very similar things, so you can swap the two if you want to try something new. Or if you like to power the deck down a bit, because I think Helga baselines around an 8. We're playing with big creatures and they don't all have trample. Garruk's Uprising is a workhorse in this deck. Just be warned that a trample anthem makes this card and you a scary threat at the table. Need a combat trick with card draw attached? Inspiring Call is the perfect option for 3 mana, especially if you need to protect your valuable Hydras from a board wipe. Garruk really likes big creatures. Return of the Wild Speaker rewards you for casting huge Hydras, if you can afford the hefty 5 mana to cast it. Up the Beanstalk is a slightly shifted Garruk's Uprising. It's super good for only 2 mana though. Finally, a big blue spell. Pull from Tomorrow capitalizes on your huge mana base to draw just a ton of cards in a pinch. I prefer to focus on cards that aren't price prohibitive when I'm making these lists. However, sometimes it's fun to ball out on a deck, and it's important to know how you can upgrade your deck if you eventually want to. Here's a list of cards over $10 that will make this deck instantly stronger. Big creatures are scary, which means you're going to be a target for removal. The Ozolith allows you to move around +1/+1 counters if a Hydra gets removed. Maybe you'll slam all of those onto Helga so she can tap for a huge amount of mana. Maybe you'll throw them on a Hydra with trample. It's flexible, hence why it's $40. Ozolith the Shattered Spire is a little different, but it's also extremely good in this deck for only $7. The Great Henge is the type of card that completely alters the strength of your deck by including it in the 99. I think it's fair to say it's a top 5 strongest green staple. It may even be number 1. For $60, this card is honestly so strong I just have no interest in playing it in my own decks. Falling into a similar category, Doubling Season is one of the best doublers in the game. Double the tokens, double the counters. It's perfect for Hydras and sits around $45. There's nothing better than blocking a board wipe with Heroic Intervention, except maybe counterspelling a Heroic Intervention trying to block a board wipe. Heroic Intervention sits right at $10, so it's much more affordable than most of the other cards on this section of the list. For example, Cyclonic Rift is $40 because it can't be blocked by Heroic Intervention. It's one of the better board wipes in Magic. Of course, board wipes don't matter when you've got a Teferi's Protection in hand. Another $40 card, Teferi's Protection is the ultimate protection spell in a way. Keeping in that $40 theme, Mana Drain is the type of counterspell you don't want being used against this Hydra deck. Not only is your card countered, but whoever casts Mana Drain gets a huge influx of mana on their next turn if they counter the right thing. If you're looking to actually end the game, Akroma's Will is a win con for only $10. This falls into a similar category as the Great Henge, as I don't play it because the play pattern just kind of bores me. What doesn't bore me is this cool little $20 artifact, Doubling Cube. There's something hilarious about the interaction between Helga and the cube, where you really don't even need lands anymore other than to pay for Doubling Cube's activation. The next card screams Hydras. Unbound Flourishing cares about permanents with X in their mana cost. Hydras have a lot of these. That's not all though. It works with instants and sorceries with X as well. Just the perfect card for this deck for around $15. Anointed Procession and Mondrak Glory Dominus are both token doublers. We aren't making a ton of tokens in this deck, but there are cards you can tech in that do make lots of Hydra tokens. These are pretty pricey at $60 and $40 respectively. Kodama of the West Tree is functionally a trample anthem in the deck. Not only that, but it serves as a ramp card as well. Quite a package for $20. Probably the biggest mistake printed in recent memory outside of Nadu, Roaming Throne is a $30 trigger doubler. Noticing a theme with wanting lots of doublers and those cards being really expensive? Tribute to the World Tree is a value engine. It either draws you cards or gives you +1/+1 counters, both of which are great. It's especially good if Helga gets removed. You can quickly get her back and build those +1/+1 counters back up. Guardian Project has a very similar ability, which makes sense as they're both around $10. The Monarch gives you card draw, but it can also give you double the +1/+1 counters with Court of Garenbrig. Insane value for another $10 card. If you really want to ball out for card draw, there may not be a better card than Rhystic Study. It's $45. Do you pay the 1? Or maybe you pay the 2. Smothering Tithe is the cohort's Rhystic Study, providing you with treasure tokens to ramp you up. It's $30, so you're definitely not including this in a budget brew. Budget brew Boseiju? I hope you see the vision with that line. Boseiju Who Endures is begging for a reprint while it sits at $40, but it's an auto-include in any green deck where budget isn't a concern. Same goes for Odawara Soaring City in blue decks. Super cool card. Anyway, $20. If you go to Scryfall, there's a tooltip note for Helga's mana ability that's worth considering. You don't have to spend all of her mana to cast the same creature. This means you can tap Helga for, say, 5. You can then spread out that 5 mana across multiple Hydras to ensure they're hitting 4 power to trigger her first ability. This isn't anything special, but it is absolutely worth noting. Being able to trigger Helga's ability multiple times each turn is of huge value, as each +1/+1 gained is another mana on the next turn. Each trigger is a card, and each life point matters.